What is going on, guys? I'm Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another video. So, the old director, producer, and studio head of Treyarch Zombies, Jason Blundell, has done an interview or a podcast with Jeff Gertzman. It's about 1 hour, 20 minutes long. They talk about loads of different stuff, along with, as you would expect, Jason's time working on COD Zombies from World at War up until Black Ops 4. And some of the stuff he reveals in this interview about Easter eggs that we still haven't found to this day, content that got cut, how zombies even came into existence, why Black Ops 3 Zombies did so well, and even why Black Ops 4 failed in a way. There is so much more that he reveals in this podcast, but I just wanted to go over his talking points about zombies because, let's be honest, and I know a lot of people also share the same opinion, Jason Blundell as the director of Zombies, or even before that when he wasn't the director and just a regular developer working on the game, some of the stuff he did and implemented changed this mode forever, and some of the best parts of it came from him. Just in my opinion, after watching this video, I didn't even know he worked on Derice, or at least I didn't know he had such a big input. And so after learning that, it all made sense to me why COD Zombies was so good and why after he left, post Black Ops 4, it changed drastically. Whether or not you want to say it got worse or better, that's up to you. All I will say is there was a noticeable shift in everything COD Zombies did after he left. And just watching this interview again reminded me what is missing now. And it's him. It is a director, a producer, a studio head with the creative vision and ideas that Jason had. And if you watch the full interview, I will leave the link to it down in the description. I can guarantee you'll come away with that opinion as well. But getting into it then, let's take a look at what Jason said about zombies. One of the first things he talks about is the beginning of this game mode, how it came to be. We have heard this story before. Back during World at War, a couple of rogue Treyarch developers in their spare time were working on this survival zombies mode on the side. A few people within Treyarch and even Activision then had a try of it, and the response was so positive, people were enjoying this side mode so much that Activision said, okay, you know what? Even though World at War is supposed to be a serious game, you can include this small little zombies mode, but it has to be right at the end after you beat the campaign as kind of like a bonus. And we're not going to advertise this. We're not going to market it. It's just going to be a hidden game mode that people can play if they complete its main content. And that was supposed to be it. Treyarch and Activision never thought it would go any further than that. It was supposed to be Nectar and Toten, and that's it. There were never any plans to take it any further. But when people started to play it, the amount of positive feedback they got and letters that were sent into the studio from fans saying how amazing it was, we then got Verrucht, we then got Shinonuma and Derice, and from that point on, zombies became the third pillar of Call of Duty. And that only happened because, well, a couple of developers decided to work on this mode in their spare time for fun, and two, us, the fans, the community, loved it so much that the developers felt like they had no other choice but to continue it.
It seems like it was probably a risk at the time, but the fans were on board from the get-go. But the inclusion of this zombies stuff, these zombies in Call of Duty all of a sudden, I mean, Treyarch carving out an identity. Like, yeah, you talk about Black Ops and the kind of subversion of what is war and what is the technology we have to wage it. But at the same time, back during World of War, you kind of have this bonus little thrown in post credit, like this little thing here that suddenly became a juggernaut, not to, but yeah, it became this massive, I mean, it became the third pillar of Call of Duty, in a game that kind of has these, you're single player, you're competitive. And
Jeff, it shouldn't have. It absolutely shouldn't have, right? And it was, as I'm sure you've heard the stories, it was being made by a couple of guys in the lunchtime on what was already a very hard project that was taking a lot of hours, right?
Sometimes you got to blow off some steam by doing more work.
Exactly. and it started to go around the studio. And then suddenly we're hearing Activision executives sending in emails, I got to round 12, And once that started happening, we were like, okay. But then at the same time, World at War is, as with all war-based historical things, it's a serious topic. We literally finished World at War with the bomb going off, right? So, you're sitting there going, really, we shouldn't be doing zombies after we just did the atomic bomb scene, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so Activision, quite rightly, and I agree with them, which was like, we're not going to advertise this. We're not going to talk about this. We'll put it in there and, put it as an unlock if you complete the campaign. And then it just exploded. People were just contacting us. I've never, you used to hear those TV shows and they go, oh, the mailbag's full. I've never seen a mailbag full, but I think it was at Treyarch for zombies, the number of people that were contacting us. And that wasn't, I wasn't involved in that bit, but I would hear about the success of it. So when I get the call and they say, Jay, you wouldn't mind just producing a zombie map for you, for us, because we're kind of doing this other thing. Because I've been doing I did some Spider-Man 3 work and a James Bond
little James
game,
Bond, yeah.
little James Bond, another thing. But they said, well, can you do this? And so I went in, and I could feel the intimidation of it. I was genuinely intimidated because you're like, there's a fan base who are passionate, and they, by not advertising it, the community took it as their own. And that was a very, very important. If you talk about the secret sauce for why it happened like that, and you can see it actually today now in what's happening, I think, out in the game space. The more you market and say, this is cool, you should buy it, it's great, the more now the community goes, and who are you to tell me what I should or shouldn't like?
Yeah.
Zombies was, because we didn't say a word about it, it caught fire in this kind of more organic kind of word of mouth way, and it was seen as their game. So it's kind of completely opposite to the Call of Duty formula, which is the most prescribed big thing out there.
Like our commercials at the NBA All-Star game, and it's like one of the most viewed. Yeah.
And then you've got this indie thing that is truly as indie as it comes, which is a couple of guys doing something, and then sticking onto this juggernaut of a game that is selling millions of units. And suddenly that crowd started growing. So when they said, "Will you do something?" I was like, "Sure." And it was Derice. Derice was the first zombie map that I kind of did, which was in World at War. And I just remember thinking, well, let's just throw everything at the wall, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But I'd also, my background is campaign, so it's storytelling, campaign mechanics. And so I brought that kind of twist to the, my humble contribution to it would be to that twist onto the zombie mode, which was telling a more definite story, putting a bit more emotional resonance in there. And then the Easter eggs were already kind of going, but I took my programmer's background and started doing encrypted messages on more design-based campaign mechanics inside there, a little bit more, right? And then that kind of grew over time as we kind of got later on and get, levels like Mob of the Dead and Origins and these other things later in the series.
What I didn't know was that Jason Blundell worked on Derice, and he didn't just work on it, he was asked to produce that map, which when I think about it now, considering Derice is always in my top 10 favourite zombies maps ever, it's miles above any other World at War map, not only from the gameplay side, but that was really where the zombie storyline started, and coincidentally, or perhaps not now, knowing this, that was also the first zombies map that Jason produced. So before that, yes, we had Nectar and Totem, which really had no story. It was introduced later on. It's really the same with Erupt. Shinonuma started to have a bit of a storyline, but not really. It just had the main characters. The zombie story truly began in Derice, and that was because Jason Blundell produced it, due to his background working on campaigns in which the entire mode revolves around the storyline. That's the most important part. He brought that side of him into zombies, and he kicked off the zombie story that we know now. Everything in there revolving Richtof and Takeo, Nikolai and Dempsey, him teleporting Maxis and Samantha away, the experiments with the Nazis, wonder weapons. The zombie storyline began because Jason Blundell was asked to produce Derice. And obviously because that was the first zombies map he worked on, it was new to him. He thought, you know what, this may be the only shot I ever get, let's just throw everything at it. And the result was an amazing map that truly changed zombies forever. And that continued into the future. After that, he went back to work on the campaign, but he was asked again to work on Mob of the Dead, which he did again. Turns out to be one of the best zombies maps ever. He was then asked to produce Origins shortly after. Again, one of the best zombies maps ever. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the best zombies maps, in my opinion, when it comes to the storytelling and Easter eggs, came from him. That's not to say other zombies maps that had other producers weren't as good. I think Buried is amazing. I love the Ruct, but there was a noticeable difference between Jason produced zombies maps and ones that weren't. Now this next clip that I want to show you from his interview is where Jason kind of reveals to us that not every Easter egg in zombies has been found. There are still things in those older games from World at War to Black Ops 4 he would be referring to that we still haven't found. We know one of those is probably the impossible Easter egg, although I don't think we're ever going to know if we find that. We may do, but we won't know if it's the impossible Easter egg until Jason himself confirms it. And well, if you listen to what he says in this clip, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, and for a while there, you were the face of zombies. And it's funny, like going and looking, there are still people out there that are like, he said he was going to reveal this Easter egg. Like there was, has everything been found? Is there still something out there? There's still stuff out there that you buried in some of the stuff.
And Jeff, to be honest, if I have my way, I'll be dead and buried, and there'll still be stuff in there, and I'll be quite happy. Yeah, it was such a fun time because as games have become more commercial and the costs are higher and so forth, there's more scrutiny. Again, as an EP of the past, I understand that you got to manage risk. We've got to understand what resources we're applying, all these other boring, dry things, but essential. To have a mode where the devs are truly able to create stuff and curate the tone without a scent of oversight. It was very inside such a juggernaut,
right,
is incredibly special. And if to show my Star Trek nerd aspect of this, is if there's a nexus to get back to, it is that feeling, right? It's that
right.
How do you get back to this place where you've got the financial support of such an amazing kind of property, but you've got the freedom of being an indie, like you're just kind of creating, because that's what we all got into the industry to do, right?
Another really interesting thing that Jason revealed in this podcast was why Black Ops 3 Zombies was so different to any other experience until that point. Why it succeeded, not just in terms of it being so popular, but the content that we got on that game was, for the most part, top quality, which is why it's considered to be so good. And the reason for that is not something I would have ever expected. I didn't know this before. I just thought most of BO3 Zombies' success was down to the Treyarch team at the time. But another integral reason was the failure of that game's campaign. Because BO3's campaign had to get reworked, Jason and Craig Houston needed about 2 months to write a brand new storyline for it. And so that meant the 200 plus developers that would work on the campaign were then pushed over to Zombies to make maps for that mode, which meant for about 2 months, the Treyarch Zombies team had an additional 200 developers that could work on it. Now, how that translated in terms of the content we got, I don't know, because the 2 maps we had on day one were Shadows of Evil and The Giant, which is standard, but it may be those 200 additional developers meant the detail in those maps, the atmosphere and character they were able to create was so much higher because of that. They would have also been working on Rise and Draka and possibly Zetsubou and Shima as well. And you look at those maps, The Giant, Shadows of Evil, Rise and Draka, they were as good as they were because Black Ops 3's campaign ultimately was in a bad place, allowing its developers for a couple of months to work on Zombies instead.
But the interesting thing was, because we were so behind the 8 ball now, we were kind of trying to catch up and get. And a campaign is such a big thing. A campaign is a black hole of resources and time, right?
Yeah.
What I actually ended up doing was I was like, okay, campaign team, start making zombies while we work out what we're going to make for the campaign. So the interesting thing about Black Ops 3 is the reason why we had such a robust zombie offering is the campaign was screwed, and I needed 2 months to write the story with Craig or sit down and go, well, what are we going to do? So hey, you 200-man team, start making zombie maps while we try and work out what the hell we're going to make.
And from the past clip, you've already seen Jason say his campaign background is the reason why the zombie storyline started and is the reason why Derice, Mob of the Dead, and Origins was so good. So if you've then got another 200 campaign developers, a lot of them with backgrounds on storytelling, or at least knowing that role, working on zombies, that tells you everything you need to know. Why the zombies almost felt like it was on the same level as the campaign in terms of storytelling in Black Ops 3. Why it went up another 5 levels from the story they told in BO2 to an almost campaign-like story they told in BO3. Jason also spoke about what happened to Black Ops 4 campaign, because we know that game didn't have one and instead it was replaced by Blackout, but originally it was supposed to have one. And what ultimately happened is they wanted it to be different, and through trying different things and failing along the way, before they could come to something and fully complete it, they just ran out of time, meaning whatever they made for it or whatever plans they still had for it had to be scrapped. It wasn't possible for them to make a campaign for Black Ops 4 before its release date. Again, similar to the situation with Black Ops 3, that may explain why we had the most zombies maps ever on day one in Black Ops 4. Blood of the Dead, Classified, 9, Voyage of Despair. You can argue whether or not you think they're great quality. I think they're quite good, but the quantity was definitely there. A lot of effort was put into them, and maybe, although we don't say it in this clip, the reason we got 4 zombies maps on day one was because Black Ops 4's campaign never made it, so maybe again all of those campaign developers got pushed to zombies, resulting in more maps. I don't actually know if that one's true, I'm just theorizing.
So Black Ops 4 in some ways feels like that maybe after years of doing that and having things go sideways and be able to put it together, like, is Black Ops 4 the one where it got away? There's a lot of stories about what this 2v2 campaign or whatever it was supposed to be, and yeah.
I want to be careful because I don't want to say something that Activision or Microsoft would be upset with me about.
Sure.
But I would say that yeah, there was attempts done. There was a quest to look for a different shape of campaign that did not pan out. Um, there was something exciting about what we were kind of going after, and often is the case, by the way. You have an
Yeah.
idea, but Call of Duty, we hit our date on time every time. I said that as in the past tense, but
Yeah,
we
yeah.
used to on time every time. We never miss, right? And so when you're asking to kind of explore something or do something different, there's a time box, and it's like there's a zero barrier. And if you've not found it by that point, it's because
Yeah.
we're going to be on time every time.
Right.
So that's what happened to it. I mean, that was true of other experiences that we had. Not to drag it in the same way, but we had a zombie map that was very, very exciting. This kind of transit map with buses and stuff had these concept. It just got past the zero barrier time, and then you're like, okay, cut it down, cut it again, because the production bounty kicks in, which is it's got to land at this point in time. If it's not ready here, then it's gone.
Right.
Now, at the same time, you're also spinning up what will become Warzone and what's kind of going on there,
Right.
Blackout and all this kind of stuff, right? So. There was a moving of resources as well, right? Which is like, okay, we're going to pivot around this way. And I think that's something I'm incredibly proud of for Activision and for Treyarch, which was their ability to be nimble and to make hard calls quickly, decisively, and make the best out of the situation. Because you don't go to war with the army you want. You go to war with the army you've got, and that's what's also exciting about game development. Every day you walk in, it's different. It's a different situation, and you're like thinking on your feet about, okay, what's the best move to make, right?
As you would have noticed towards the end there, you would have heard how Jason speaks about a transit-like map. Now, this confused me because obviously he's talking about Black Ops 4 in this section, but he compares this situation of Black Ops 4's campaign getting cut because they ran out of time to them also having a zombies map they wanted to make that he describes as being a kind of transit map with buses. It was a great concept, but they got past the zero barrier time. They just didn't have the time to make what they wanted to, and so a lot of the ideas they had got cut down. Now, I'm pretty sure he's just referring to the map transit there, right? I've heard that story before. Treyarch's idea for transit was so much bigger than what we ended up getting, but due to console limitations and time restraints, their grand idea for this map was cut, and we got transit as a result. This big experimental map, but was never truly what Treyarch envisioned for it. So I feel like he's referring to transit here, although he does kind of make it seem like he's talking about another map in Black Ops 4 that was in a similar situation. This final section of the interview I think is the most telling because Jason talks about the reasons why he left Treyarch, which has been on our minds ever since he left during Black Ops 4. Now, technically he left during the development of Cold War because they would have begun to develop Cold War as soon as they finished Black Ops 4, so Jason would have left Treyarch very early on into Cold War's development, and he says the reason for this was simply things were changing. Treyarch had matured, going from World at War, still a amateur studio. They were very much able to do their own thing. However, as time went on and they released more and more games and Call of Duty became bigger, they'd reached a point that they kind of, it's difficult to explain. They knew what they were, and they had a responsibility to fulfill that. And as for Jason Blundell, you've got to remember the longer he was there, the more promotions he took. He went higher and higher up, and the higher up you go, that means you usually have not less influence on what's going on below you. Of course, what goes on below you usually starts with you, but he was no longer involved in aspects of the game's development as much as he would like to be because of the roles that he was in and the roles that he took, the promotions that he was given. Executive producer, director, co-studio head. This now meant he was further away from actual game development, which meant he couldn't get as involved. He couldn't do things himself. He had people doing it for him. He would tell them what to do, which kind of annoyed him. He wanted to get involved, but if you're the boss, that's no longer your responsibility. So from what I can gather, one of the main reasons Jason left was because he couldn't really get involved in the actual development side of the game anymore due to him being so high up in terms of responsibility. That was no longer his job, which then left him feeling not as excited, and that was why he left.
What happens at the end of Treyarch there, at the end of your time at Treyarch? Do you have a moment where you fell off the horse and you're like, I gotta get, is it, you're most of the way through Black Ops Cold War and you're like, I need a change? Or
no, it was, I mean, it's the first time I'm really talking about this stuff, but the machine was changing. The machine was changing. The studio had matured. I was very proud of the studio that I saw when I joined, and then the maturity and the experience at that point. I was like, this is great, But I also realized that I didn't think that I would be helpful into the next phase that they were kind of maybe very similar to what you're describing.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I could see how that was kind of going, and by that point, I'm a co-studio head as well, right? So, there's multiple studio heads. I'm now further away from the game, and that's kind of grinding me a little bit. I'd always kind of gone for promotions and gone higher up because I felt I could. My motivation was always. I should say the money. No, the motivation was always like, if I go higher up, I can protect the team from greater things, or I can steer the team in a better way. I got to a certain point where I'm like, okay, maybe I am now, but I'm so far away from the game that I'm dropping certain things. I'm not able to touch certain things in certain ways.
Yeah,
and I felt my it wasn't as exciting for me anymore. I suppose very similar to maybe what you're describing, which was. It just was. There's only been like 2 times in my entire career I've walked into work and thought I don't want to be here, and each time I've like something has to. If I ever have that thought, something has to change because I love my job and I love my industry, and if I'm ever like I don't want to come in today, I never have days like that. That never happens. So if it happens, I go stop. Something's really off.
Yeah, that's basically. How it sort of happened to me. But this most recent time, like I steered myself as far away from promotions that would take me out of the loop, that would take me out of the day to day. And
you're smarter than me.
That ends up getting you in a different way, right? Because if you're not taking those positions, someone else is, and you eventually are reporting to someone that you're just like, this guy's terrible. What am I doing? and you kind of like, oh, if I had pushed for this, if I had grown in this specific way, maybe I could protect this more. But yeah, it's the other side of it has its own challenges too. And
I used to take the director and the EP job, right? Because I wanted. Yeah. I used to see historically, right, the director would get screwed over by the EP. Or the director would screw over the EP, so I thought I'll take both those jobs then, and then we're all good, right? And I thought, well, maybe if I collect studio head as well at the same time, then I've got all bases covered, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna I'm gonna limit how many jobs I take under my umbrella in one time. But yeah, it was a position of like, surely if I take that, I can add things to that. I can be a better steward. I can protect the creatives and give them the space to be able to do this stuff. I can also speak to the, Activision at the time, in its past incarnation. I had a very kind of close relationship just across the parking lot. We could walk across and talk to them. And I was very much of the opinion, still are, that the balance between a publisher and a developer, there needs to be an equal push and pull. If it's too weighted one way or the other way, it's really bad news for the kind of game being made.
Yeah.
And so. We used to joke, I used to do these interviews and I would say, if Activision finds out I'm saying this, I'll get in trouble, right? They knew everything. I would tell them we were all right, but we got to a point of trust and understanding that allowed us to play in that way, and I think the audience then appreciated it. And so, but that was built up over time, right? So, yeah, these are things that being in those higher positions afforded you, right? But there's also a downside to that as well.
Definitely. Yes, absolutely. So you leave Treyarch and suddenly find yourself trying to start a new game studio in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So, again, just theorizing, could that have been one of the reasons why Black Ops 4 Zombies was considered by a lot of people to be a downgrade on Black Ops 3? Why it was considered in many aspects to be not bad, but just not great when it really should have been? Was some of that because Jason Blundell no longer had influence in aspects that he did in previous games? I don't know. But I did find this interview super interesting. There was so much I learned in here. Definitely go ahead and check out the full podcast over on Jeff's channel. I will leave the link to it down in the description. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments section below. I'd be really interested to read your guys' comments. But yeah, thank you for watching. Drop a like rating if you've enjoyed. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.